You may like to close your eyes. And do you want to introduce this one I'm going to read?
Well, we were looking for messages. We have thousands of messages from the angels at our disposal. There was a fellow back in the early 1900s who discovered he was a medium. He was actually a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and he lost his wife, and he went on a journey and went to mediums and found out that she was still there and all that, proved himself that there was life after death, and then he was told that he was a medium and that he could receive messages as well, so he went that way. And then eventually he received messages from the celestial angels. So that's kind of the beginning of this journey of divine love that we talk about. The real beginning was with Jesus. That was his message. His message was about love. And so Jesus comes back, and others come back and talk about or write this through this medium who was a automatic writer. He first didn't believe it. He thought that it was all bunk because it didn't agree with Orthodox Christian belief. And so he burnt the first messages he got from Jesus and celestials. But eventually his wife Helen, who was communicating with him every day with automatic writing, convinced him that this is the real deal. So he came back to it, he accepted it, and he wrote over those years, between 1914 and 1926, I believe. 23. 2,500 messages. And they're in a series of volumes, 4 volumes that are available. If anybody ever wants to read them, I'm happy to bring them for you for free. It doesn't cost you anything.
I think Raphael's got some here.
Raphael's got some. Where was I going with this? So other mediums have taken up the cause as well. So this guy in Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador, was getting messages from celestials, and in particular from Judas of Iscariot, who had worked his way out of the dark plains into the celestial heavens. Now, he was a disciple of Jesus, so he knew how to do it. Took him a while, but he got there. And so this Hans was getting messages, and there's a book called Judas of Iscariot, which has all of these messages in it, and this is one of them. And this message is about hearing your inner voice, which I think is quite instructive and really kind of ties together what I talked about this morning. And so here we are, and this is the message from Jesus. Not all his messages were from Jesus, very few actually.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of them, and this is in the beginning when he started to open up to this gift.
I think this is an exceptional message, and it reminds me of you and me, Terry, and those of us who envy, more dramatic kind of gifts. This is where it's really at. Yeah. Okay.
Not to be rivalrous.
Yes. This is not a competition. As long as I'm winning. All right. I am here, Jesus, and this was in 2001. I have observed you. He's talking to Hans, the medium in Ecuador. I have observed you as you pass the whole day thinking of the trance message that I delivered last June, and above all, the part where I spoke about the internal voice impressed you very much. You have wondered if you too could develop this ability, the ability to hear your internal voice clearly. I write your internal voice between quotation marks because in fact it is not your voice. It only sounds in your interior, but it is a voice of external origin. It is our voice, the voice of Spirit. All people have the ability to perceive this internal voice, and in fact, everybody hears it. But in most cases, they don't listen to it. And there are 3 reasons for this to happen. First, it is difficult to distinguish it from your own thoughts, because we, the spirits, have to use the instruments that the human puts at our disposition. That is to say, his or her mind. And in that mind, we formulate the answers or suggestions that we wish to convey. Of course, this voice doesn't ring distinctively. And since it originates in your brain, it is part of your mind, the same as your own thoughts are part of your mind. And the one exception that this voice was implanted into you, impressed upon you, as right now I am impressing you with these thoughts. How are you able then to distinguish if what you perceive, feel, and hear comes from us and are not the machinations of your own mind? I admit that this is difficult, but in this same moment, you can already give yourself the answer. Our voice arrives accompanied by certain sensations. You have the impression that you are not hearing it in your head, in your brain, but you're rather feeling something, which is formulated in your chest, in your heart, and is a very similar sensation which you perceive when the love flows into you, transmitting the impression of your chest being contracted, but a pleasant, happy sensation. You feel the same happiness now, and in fact, I can assure you that you are experiencing the inflowing of this great love that the Heavenly Father grants us in His infinite kindness. As I have said, our coming and communicating is accompanied by certain sensations that allow you to realize that what you are feeling and the information that you are receiving is not information that your own mind is formulating, but is something that comes from outside, from the world you still ignore, from that wonderful world of spirit. I have explained to you the first reason why people don't perceive or why they refuse to perceive this kind of communication. Simply, they confuse it with their own fantasy. But there is another reason. Imagine the soul like a radio receiver. You can still remember those old apparatus which, together with the transmission of the sounds, also transmitted a boisterous background crackling. You can sometimes hear this phenomenon even today. When you drive a car with the radio turned on, and as you move out of the reach of the broadcasting station, in the same way the noise increases, interfering with radio reception, making it more and more difficult to understand the speaker. In some way, this is what also happens with the soul. The soul has a potential power of reception, of perceiving our voices, of being tuned in with the world of spirit. But besides the work of tuning in to the radio station, that is, of elevating your spirituality, of getting ready with spiritual thoughts, primarily of a corresponding sustained attitude, there are other factors intervening with the clear reception of our messages and our guidance. You live in a noisy, materialistic world, which scarcely leaves you time to devote yourselves to what is much more important, because it is potentially eternal, the development of the soul. Well, this is not exactly true, because yes, there is time, all the time in the world to do this, but the distractions, and the amusements are so great that people don't take the time to dedicate it to the spiritual. We could say that this atmosphere acts like an extremely strong background noise. Their upset thoughts are like the deafening waves of the ocean, like the boisterous surf, which covers our intent of entering into contact with you. Therefore, you have to work to make the volume of this background noise lower. And this is not difficult to do. Take your time. Isn't this what Augustine said this morning? Take your time. Retire from this world from time to time. For this purpose, you don't need to enter a monastery. No, just retire to a calm, silent place, a separate room, a corner in the forest, or in the nearby park, where you may stay a while all alone with us and with God. Guess what your homework is this week, gang? I'm checking up on you every day. You will be surprised how quickly your perception of our guidance will increase. When I lived on earth, the world was calmer. Noisy, yes, but we had more moments for contemplation, at least those of us who enjoyed the invaluable gift of freedom. As a boy, when studying the Hebrew scriptures, many times I felt that interior voice very clearly, and I was always filled with a great deal of happiness. As we informed you in other messages, I was born without sin. That is to say, me too, by the way. I didn't have those encrustations which deform the soul, and this is very important to take into consideration. These encrustments are the third reason why you, many of you, have so much difficulty in receiving our guidance. You could compare these encrustations with an insulating layer muffling our voice, and this, in combination with the aforementioned background noise, makes the perception of our advice and messages almost impossible. What a challenge. This is your homework, remember? It's your homework. Therefore, besides retirement and meditation, there is another work that you have to do in order to improve perception. You have to remove, to tear away and eliminate, this is what Terry was talking about, these encrustments. And this will be part 2 of our mediumship development course. And there is only one instrument which serves this purpose well: prayer. We are attracted by prayer. The angels, if you want their help, they're attracted by prayer. And more important still, it attracts God's purifying love. And jointly, we can undertake the work of cleansing. Cleansing, detaching these parts alien to the soul, like the coral which covers the sunken ship. As an adolescent, I used to retire frequently. In my free moments, I liked to climb to the top of the hills, to withdraw into the forest, and there, in the soothing atmosphere of nature, enter into conversation with our Creator. My mother called this mysticism, this strange communion with nature. Well, in some way, this was true, but still more, it was the contact with my Heavenly Father, my conversations with Him, and the immense happiness offered me by this proximity with our Creator, who for me didn't live far away up in his heavens, but very close, so near, in fact, that I could so easily turn to him in all my concerns and worries. Conversation, you asked me? Yes, they were really conversations, and they continue this way, even clearer, more transparent and translucent. And as you now receive impressions and questions and doubts are forming in your mind, the same happened with me, and the answer arrived immediately, like in your case. Am I not responding to your questions? Aren't you the one who conducts in some way this communication through your questions and doubts? You're beginning to realize, and you feel very happy. It is one of the happiest moments in your life, and you can repeat it. We can repeat it. We are awaiting your call, but we are also waiting for you to get into the necessary condition so that we can really take advantage of this opportunity. My dear brother, we are anxious to get into close contact with you, with all of you. So give us the opportunity. Get ready, tune in, and you will live even here on earth in heavenly moments. Moments all of you may enjoy if you only get ready and contribute your share to this mutual enterprise. Think it over, listen to me, and may God bless you all. I am Jesus. And the handouts that I've given you, there's a copy of this message. And so you can read it over. Are you going to pontificate now?
I will pontificate.
Okay.
So, what Jesus spoke of and what you've heard in the messages so far from Spirit, and maybe what I've said, they all direct you towards opening your soul. That's the key to all of this stuff. You can open your soul, and Jesus talks about how the soul is encrusted with conditions, layers, experiences, traumas, hurts, pains, all kinds of things that we accumulate in our life through living a life often keep us away from God. But there's always a fissure there. There's always something, some way that God's going to get in. And when you open yourself to it with a desire to awaken that part of you in there, then the angels are busy chipping away at these incrustations, trying to get in there, trying to make it possible for communication to happen. And that's why communication often with Spirit on this plane is kind of what it is, which is a more mundane scenario. I mean, it's not always that way, of course, but it's because it's so difficult for us to penetrate the higher spheres or to have connection and contact in a conscious way with these higher spirits, the ones of light and the ones in the celestial heavens. So, you know, this is really an important part of the process, talking about purification, talking about letting go of those conditions in us that hold us back from spiritual awakening, soul awakening, and from God. You know, we've made God into all of these different images, which are just our own projection on God, right? I think we can all agree that a lot of the religions in the world right now, they're talking about their own idea of God, and it's of the mind. And it becomes very complicated. You know, the longer you've got a religion, the more complicated it gets, the more they add on more and more and more in order to make it their own, you know, like, and to own it in terms of ownership of property. Like, I have the truth. But what Jesus is saying is that God is discovered individually, that we all have our way to God, and that must be respected as a personal journey. So no one else can tell you. I mean, I can't tell you how to get to God. I can tell you about some of the elements that might hold you back, as Jesus has said. But I can't tell you how to get there, because I can't be in your mind and bring it up, you know. I can't make you, you know, you can take a horse of water, but you can't make them drink. Now, one advantage of the angelic influences, they can help you get there, because they're already there. They're free of all those incrustations. They've done the work. They've let go of all that stuff, and they have ingested enough of this divine essence, this fuel for the soul, that they're transformed. They become something different from human. They're now divine in their being, in their countenance, in who they are. So because they're in that condition of divinity, of closeness with God, of even beyond perfection, because it is beyond perfection. It's something else that isn't just everything all ducks in a row and everything is perfect in terms of the human condition, where all purity is very pure. It has no flaws. It's beyond that even. Because the divine essence that goes into the soul breaks apart the incrustations, starts working on them and pushing them away or pushing them out. Then the purity begins, and it begins in that level of the human, who you are as an individual, begins to solve the problems, basically, that we all carry. These dilemmas that we all carry in our life. Am I loved? Who am I? You know, why am I here? What's this all about? These things start to get solved because the soul then starts to awaken. The soul then starts communicating with your conscious self, which is mainly up here, because that's the way we've all been programmed. And things start lining up. And as this alignment happens, as the awakening happens, and the faculties of the soul start to come alive and start to become conscious, then we're much more aware of our angel friends. We're much more aware of God. We're much more aware of our higher selves, the soul. And all these things start to come together into an experience, a new reality that emerges. It doesn't completely obliterate our physical reality at all, but it does change the perception of it and the experience of it. So then we start to see things differently. We actually, for some of us who have had trouble loving, like myself, love, yeah. I'm thinking as a young man and whatnot, I was afraid to love. I was afraid to express my feelings. I was programmed as a man to be a man, to not show your feelings and all that, to not be soft and all that stuff, even though all that stuff was in there. But I was afraid of it, because I was afraid of what other people thought of who I was as a man. So these barriers to the softer side of us, the more loving side, starts to break down. The incrustations, which is another way of saying barriers, start to change. They start to move. They start to dissolve. And as those barriers start to dissolve, then the higher sensitivities, which again, you get more and more sensitive with this stuff, start to open up, and then communication's much easier. The feeling is much easier. It's clearer. It's not kind of mixed in with all the other emotional baggage, the thoughtful baggage, and even, you know, what distracts us on the outside. I mean, all these things in the beginning kind of crowd in. I shouldn't say in the beginning, because when I started, I think a lot of people, when they start with this, they get what I call God's credit card. So you get a credit, and you get all these feelings and experiences and insights. I mean, I had angels coming to me and speaking to me and all of that right at the beginning. It was just phenomenal. You know, the whole world kind of opened up. And you get that for a while, especially those who are very sensitive will get. If they have those kind of gifts, you're going to get, it's going to open up for you. And you think it's you. You think somehow this is you. I mean, oh, I've discovered the real me and this is how I am. In reality, it's not you, it's the angels doing it for you. I mean, they carry you for a while so that you get used to it. And you also get a taste of it. It's almost like the carrot in front of the donkey, you know. Here it is, you know, keep moving forward, keep making an effort. And so they'll give you plenty of goodies and reinforcements, plenty of experiences that will reinforce that this is real. And it is real. But at some point, you've got to look at the incrustations. You've got to own them and realize that they need work. You know, that in prayer, especially in prayer, you can ask God to take them, that His love will dissolve them. And often the experience of that is that some trauma in your life, some memory in your life that isn't pleasant, and maybe you've pushed it way down there, bubbles up. And you have a brief re-experiencing of it. But that's the moment where you can release it. And if you can do that, if you can acknowledge and release, that takes faith, you know, because you get upset, you get fearful, you have all these other feelings that go with it, because, you know, you're afraid of your own feeling, right? Especially if they're negative. Afraid to acknowledge it, afraid to relive it even. But in that case, it's like a birthing, and the angels are there with you to help you release it. And when that's gone, it doesn't mean that your mind's memory of it is gone, but the feelings of it are gone. The trauma, the hurt, the pain is gone. It disappears. It's released. And as you release more and more of those incrustations, it's kind of like, you know, that saying, taking the scales off your eyes, you know, as the scales are removed. Then you come closer to this other reality. Then it becomes more real. As you continue on, and this is an incremental process. It doesn't happen overnight. But as you continue on with it and you keep applying yourself, then the changes happen, the awakenings happen, the understanding of what these guys are talking about becomes clear, because it becomes a real experience in your life, in your consciousness, and in your experience of life. these things start coming together, and coming together in a way that makes sense. There's logic in it. Even though, we keep talking about, don't worry about the mind, but the mind obviously needs to be, have reassurance that this thing is real, and it does come. It does come in lots of surprising ways, I'll tell you. And then there's a period of integration. You kind of reach a level and you kind of level off. You start integrating the experience. You start applying it, making it really a part of yourself and the way you're viewing life, your reality. And then something else, another incrustation starts popping up, and you need to deal with that. And then again, you kind of have the adjustment period. But as all this happens, as this kind of stepping stairway happens, gifts start opening up. You start seeing things and knowing things and experiencing things that you couldn't possibly know. That nobody's told you that it comes from the soul. And this is God's communication with you. So these awarenesses are really hard to explain if you haven't had a spiritual download. But for me, it comes in pictures, in words, and an aha. It's like the soul knows, the soul recognizes. It's like a whole, think of when we learn something with our mind, like a book is kind of two-dimensional, and you read words and you get it, you string them together, you string it together in your consciousness, and you figure it out, this, okay, I get it. Here, it's like a sphere. It's multi-dimensional. And you enter the sphere, you enter that place where consciousnesses expand tremendously. And these are the faculties of the soul coming into play. This is where the soul starts informing the mind. So when you're able to let go of your mental conceptions and restrictions, then this other part starts emerging. And it's different. And sometimes it's even scary. Because it's such a shift in consciousness. But it's not often scary. I think in my experience, it's joyful. It's like you feel such a sense of joy and expansion and love in that experience that you want to stay there, because this reality here is pretty bland in comparison, believe me. It's kind of bland. It's kind of two-dimensional, or three-dimensional, I guess is more accurate. And so this whole process of soul awakening brings the awareness of the angels with it. And that starts opening up in different ways. I mean, it's not, as I said, it's not the same for every person. What I experience will not be what you experience. But it will have a signature that is universal. And that is love. Love is in all of this, even the painful parts. Love is in all of this, because in order to be in the light, we can't hold on to the darkness. In order to be uplifted, we have to be lighter. If we got leaded feet with things in us that are heavy and unloving and that require us to spend a lot of energy either suppressing or just just grinning and bearing it, or whatever it is. However it is we deal with those difficult parts of life. Then that's where the energy goes. That's where the energy goes. And I think all of us are motivated here because we want to do something different. I mean, we're all on different levels, obviously. We've all had different experiences, and our souls are somewhere along the continuum of progression. I can't tell one from another. I don't think anybody can. But you can tell within yourself, how do I feel? If you go within you and say, well, how do I really feel? What's going on here? And if you can get beyond the physical, you know, at my advancing age, you know, for me, the heavy stuff is the body, you know, it's the aches and pains of the body and all that stuff, you know, like if I get beyond that, and I make a point of trying to get there, then how do I feel? Well, after the many years that I've done this, when I go there, I feel joy. I really feel joy. And the things that bothered me, I mean, I look back and all the things that I used to worry about and bothered me and held me back, and the fears and the judgments about myself and the projected judgments that I think others are having on me and all that stuff, it's like it's gone. It's gone. I mean, I can sit, my mind still goes through the machinations, the pattern. But it goes really quick. And then I'm kind of free. When I was younger, I'd say 20 years ago, the thought of sitting here and speaking to you like this would absolutely terrify me. I had such a heavy burden of fear and expectation of judgment that I could hardly speak. I mean, one-on-one was okay, but I couldn't get up in a crowd and say anything. And now all that has shifted and changed because I'm not carrying the fear anymore. That was healed. That was healed. I know you're laughing, but it's true.
I said, now you can't shut him up. She cried.
So it's a process, you know, when we talk about divine love mediumship, it ain't one little thing that you're gonna sort of add to your collection of things you know and think, okay, been there, done that, because you never have finished the process. This goes on.
It's good for our business too.
Yeah.
A lot of problems.
And the awakening of the soul awakens such a universe of experience and understanding and love and expansion and more love and more experience and more understanding and expansion and more and more and more.
More joy.
It doesn't end. So we can control it here in terms of how we do things in our lives, how much effort we spend in soul awakening and prayer, because prayer is the key here. Prayer is what awakens the soul. Desire for divine love is what awakens the soul. The more time you can spend in prayer and meditation and with God, and drawing the angels close to you, then the quicker the process, the more benefits you get. But it takes time. I mean, you got to discipline yourself. Jeanne and I do an hour a day of prayer, and then there are other prayers during the day. Sometimes we do 3 hours a day, depending on what our day is like and what's happening. You know, that's kind of more than what the average person would really want to invest, but that's our thing, and that's because of the work we do. You know, you gotta keep yourself in the energy of that. And if you kind of, the more you go up and down like this, you know, if you're doing stuff that's sort of contrary to the up, and you're doing down, it's a real struggle. You gotta get up again, then you go down, then you gotta get up again, then you go down. And that, you know, most people give up after trying that method. But what they're really doing is they don't want to give up the dark stuff. The stuff that's holding them back, or the thoughts that are not loving or positive, or the inclinations that are not in harmony with God's laws of creation. All those things. When we indulge ourselves in the negativity, and we do it often unconsciously, it's like, there goes the pattern again, Then, of course, we bring ourselves down, and then thank God for the angels, because I don't know how many times they've gotten the jack and jacked me up again, like bring me up again. And they're infinitely patient, they'll keep doing it if you ask. And, but there comes a time where you feel it, I don't know, something's different here. I kind of feel like I'm on my own. And that's where you start expiating, what we call expiating, where you have to deal with whatever it is that keeps you down there. And it's never like that. It is always like that, but hopefully a little more up, a little more up, a little more up, a little more up. And I don't know, I could go on and on with experiences I've had, and I don't think you want to hear about my personal experiences. Jeanne certainly doesn't. But
unless they're about me.
Yeah, no, many of them are actually. But life can be really good with a spiritual foundation like this. It can be very good. And the wonderful thing about this is that you are not asked to believe anything. You are only asked to try to be in the love and experience it. And when you're there, take note. What is this?
Take your handouts. Yeah.
And yeah, there is a handout about it actually. And if you can repeat the experience over and over again, which you can readily, then I think you've got something. I think you've got the key to what we're calling divine love mediumship, which is actually just saying you can communicate with angels. And this is how you do it. It's pretty simple. And they want to communicate with you, so it's not that difficult. The difficult part is to keep yourself on that trajectory upward. Because you will be challenged. Everybody is. The world challenges us. Yeah, we're 3 o'clock. That's when we're going to start the next thing. And even those around you will challenge you. But there's a lot to learn, a lot to experience. And there's lots of opportunities to experience it. But you have to want it and decide that that's what you want.
Thank you. All right, let's all follow Deborah's